This is Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room, broadcasting on Spice FM, on KTN Home, and online, www.spicefm.co.ke. Also live streaming on Spice FM KE, on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter. If you are tuning in on Spice FM, it's 94.4 in Nairobi. We are in Mombasa, 87.9. Kisumu is 102.5. 96.0 in Nakuru, 96.7 in Eldoret, 90.9 Nyeri, 97.7 in Malindi. CT, as we begin the hour, remind us today's proverb.
Yes, Kenyan proverb, modern day times, by Team Mafisi. If you lose your girlfriend in a crowded bar, just start talking to a beautiful woman and she will reappear.
If you lose a girlfriend in a crowded bar, just start talking to a beautiful woman and she will reappear.
Yes.
Proverb makes sense. You said it's by?
Well, Team Mafisi, it's Kenyan.
That's a tribe.
Please note that they did not, yes, Eric, I know where you're going with this. Please note they didn't mention if you miss your wife in a crowded bar. They said girlfriend. Specific.
One thing for sure, if you go with your wife in a crowded bar, you're never going to miss her. You will not lose her.
Wow. Okay.
I am not going to
You
comment.
two are joined in the hip.
You brought this up.
You two are joined in the hip already.
Okay.
Why
That's
do
the
you
end of
want to
that.
go
Let's
with your
move on.
wife to a
Okay.
crowded
Why
bar?
would you want to go with your wife to a crowded bar? Okay.
So you wait for Sunday, you go to church.
Wow. It's another crowd. Okay.
All right. So just like we promised, we wanted to talk about Kenya Airways again this morning. We've had the Kenya Airways conversation a number of times. We have spoken with the CEO of Kenya Airways, Alan Kilavuka, twice. We have spoken with the Kenya Airline Pilots Association. We have spoken with other people who have been following the story of Kenya Airways. Now, what we know is that before Parliament is a conversation on the renationalization of Kenya Airways, and this is putting it under one umbrella body that will bring in together the Kenya Airways, the Kenya Airports Authority, and the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, all to be managed by one entity. And now this will be a national entity. So it will become taxpayers' organization, no longer private. And currently, Kenya Airways is going through some changes. You know, they're trying to say, all right, after COVID-19, what we've seen in COVID-19, now we need to pivot. That word again, pivot. So how they're pivoting is a number of things that Alan Kilavuka, this MD, has told us. Among them will be to reduce the areas that they're operating in, look at their flight, be lean and mean, and then start growing again. But you keep asking this question whenever we speak Kenya Airways story, CT. Where did the rain start beating Kenya Airways? I mean, what went wrong? At some point, Kenya Airways was a very profitable organization. It was indeed the pride of Africa. And then things just started going south.
It's like we went into some talent show and talent competition where we're trying to determine who can bring down a successful company. We're making money, and then all of a sudden, you keep hearing stories of planes being leased. You hear of contracts for fuel. You hear all sorts of things, and none of them seem to favor the furtherance of Kenya Airways. And then I actually don't marvel that Kenya Airways is where it's at, on its knees. Kenya was brought to its knees. It didn't go or get there. It wasn't a self-propelling endeavor. There are individuals who brought Kenya Airways to its knees. And what I find even more puzzling, it became a private entity.
It's human error, not technical faults.
It's human deliberate activity. It wasn't error, it's deliberate.
Mm-hmm.
How do you explain you move from an entity that was actually government owned, you make it private, you even allow the common mwananchi to be a part owner of it, and then it starts making money. There are people who come in. It becomes a really vibrant airline. When airlines, even in the West, are failing, big airlines are collapsing. Kenya was making money. And then this group goes away. We bring in a Kenyan management. You're asking the rain. Then the rain starts beating us from that point onwards. You don't see it because Kenya was successful. But things start happening, and we have this problem and that problem. Then there's this concession we have at Heathrow. We are told we've sold it. We're all manner of things. We're leasing planes, and you're wondering, why are we leasing planes from a company that has leased them? And you wonder, but don't we know where these planes are manufactured? Questions which never get answered. But the thing that is consistent, Kenya loses money, and it's not, in fact, it's not even on its knees, it's on its belly.
Good thing is that the investigative journalism team of Africa Uncensored, through their CEO and co-founder John-Allan Namu and the other team, have taken a couple of months going back into where that rain started beating us, where the turbulence became too much. And they've released a 4-part series, Africa Uncensored, on their YouTube channel, Africa Uncensored. It's called Kenya Airways Fall of the Pride. And we want to understand exactly what they found when they were investigating this. They spoke to several people who were involved. They've spoken to the current CEO. They've spoken to the current chairman of Kenya Airways. They've spoken to former employees of Kenya Airways, current employees of Kenya Airways, and others, including a senator who was in the team that investigated this matter in the last session, in the last parliament. So John-Allan Namu is now joining us on the line. Good morning, John-Allan.
Morning, Eric. Morning, Du. Morning, Titi.
Good morning, John.
Good morning, John.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
We are doing very well, John.
Yeah, fantastic.
CT is woke
CT,
this morning, so it's great.
yeah. I really enjoyed how woke CT was this morning. I was listening to the something Matiti.
You know, I was introduced to this word woke this week. It was actually explained to me in detail, and I was told it doesn't mean what I knew woke to be. So
It doesn't mean that you're woke now.
it isn't a past tense, yes. And you can't say I am awoke. No, it's just I am woke.
It's nothing to do with the English language. Awake, awoke, awoken,
No.
woke.
Woke.
All right, John, welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to host you. I love your trophy cabinet.
Sorry?
We love your trophy
Oh,
cabinet.
the trophy cabinet behind me. It's not really a trophy cabinet, but yeah, it's just knickknacks that we found over the years.
No, that yellow futuristic vehicle is something else.
It's an ode to my childhood.
Right. So, John, tell us about this new series that you released just the day before yesterday. Kenya Airways,
Well, first-
The Fall of the Pride.
First of all, I mean, I'm very relieved to be sitting in this position as editor / co-producer of the piece, because the majority of the work, the heavy lifting, was done by people in my team, by Maurice Onyango, as well as help from a team of really good journalists from under the banner of Finance Uncovered. They operate from the UK, but also investigate a lot of stuff here in Kenya and in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
But the point of Fall of the Pride was really to trace exactly the question that you asked: where did the rain start beating Kenya Airways? As a Kenyan, speaking as a Kenyan, it always fills me with pride to be able to fly from one destination to another. We had a number of stories, while I was at ATN, where we got out of scrapes and got onto a Kenya Airways plane and were able to relax. And it was really, it's really an airline that has a lot of special, there's a lot that Kenyans really invested in it emotionally, right? So for it to have come to a point where it's half-year losses this year, 14 billion shillings, is really something to think about. So what we did was we started going through the company's records way back from the 90s. And what we, discovered over time is now some of those small stories that TT was talking about, about fuel hedging, about procurement problems, and things started to mount up in terms of losses. And then, there was this profligate spending at some point that was explained by one of the former employees that we spoke to, Sadano Query. And all of these added up to, quite a number of losses. But the big move, the place where, people can say the rain started beating us, was Project Mawingu. Now, Project Mawingu was a very ambitious and well-intentioned project to expand Kenya Airways aircraft fleet by almost over 100%, right? And expand its routes into different parts of Africa, different parts of the world, become a hub, real hub for Africa. So the intention of it was very good, because what it would have done is it would have turned Kenya into a Dubai of sorts,
Right.
where people land here to go to different parts of Africa, where people connect through here. It still happens to a large extent, but not in the way that it was envisioned by Project Mawingu. But what then Project Mawingu did is it opened the floodgates, in a sense, for the kind of procurement problems that we've seen over the years. Buying of narrow body aircraft as opposed to wide body aircraft, and then putting them onto routes that required wide body aircraft. The procurement of the aircraft themselves were very shrouded in quite a bit of mystery. Special purpose vehicles being put together to buy them, and those special purpose vehicles being registered in secrecy jurisdictions. So you wonder what the problem is, and that started to roll on and on and on and on. Kenya Airways also has, quite a number of very experienced staff who were part of, Kenya Airways' journey from 1996 onwards, and who started being whittled out slowly by slowly. And then staff became a key problem, and it became almost cyclical, where every 3 to 4 years there'd be sacking of staff, but, Kenya Airways bills wouldn't go down. So the story of Kenya Airways isn't, the story of one man or one story. It's really a combination of things, and a combination of men and women who, over time were able to bring Kenya Airways to the point where it is. And honestly speaking, as a Kenyan, I sympathize with Alan Kilavuka's situation now, because what he is carrying is a legacy of all of these mistakes, all of this mismanagement, and all of the misfortune that Kenya Airways befell over the years, that it's had to carry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just going back to that, the Project Mawingu, like you said, it was very well intentioned, just like many other projects in the country. When it is being conceived at that stage, it's a brilliant idea. Make Nairobi the hub, have the hub and spoke, look at increasing and expanding your destinations. If you want to call yourself the pride of Africa, then increase the many places that you go to from Africa, bring them to Nairobi, take them to the rest of the world. Brilliant. But then you start saying, at the implementation, it appears that's where the merchants come in, and they look at that idea and they're like, so where shall we make our money? So, for instance, let's just talk about what you've even covered in your story, the purchase of narrow-bodied aircraft to go to African destinations and the impact of that. You spoke to Mr. Okwiri, who was the head of cargo. So what exactly was wrong with purchasing this narrow-bodied aircraft versus wide-body aircraft?
So what Kenya Airways had intended to do was become the launch customer for the Dreamliner 787, which is a wide-body aircraft and can fly to various destinations, and those destinations would mainly be in Africa and different places, right? But a number of things happened there. Boeing delayed the release of the Dreamliner, if you recall, for a number of years, right? So then Kenya Airways was put in a situation where it had to, resort to something else to be able to carry on with its plan. But the decision there was interesting. So they began to lease 737 aircraft, and then went into buying the Embraers, about 10 or 11 of them, right?
Yeah.
Now the problem with putting an Embraer, at least from what we've been able to understand through the story, the problem with putting a narrow body aircraft on a route that has a lot of cargo is that when you're flying there, yes, you'll sit down, right? And you'll get to your destination, but the cargo often got left behind. And West Africa is a very, very lucrative route for Kenya Airways, right? The ticket prices are high because almost nobody flies there, right? So Kenya Airways really had that route in the palm of its hand. And changing that strategy began to now, challenge or rather began to disappoint a lot of customers. We started to lose money on cargo as well, which is where airlines make their profit. right? And the airline business, in as much as there's a lot of money, that's involved, is a very, very narrow margin business. And as Mr. Okwiri explained it to us and what we saw, cargo really is where people make the money. So if you compromise that, then you start to compromise your profit
Margins.
directly, right? And the purchase of the aircraft themselves, it was done through two banks, or rather the financing was done through two banks. Then the SPVs that I keep on mentioning, Samburu and Amboseli, it was claimed were supposedly, above board companies. But you go and try and follow who are the beneficial owners of Amboseli and Samburu, and you kind of get into a rabbit hole. And that sort of tells you that the beneficial owners of those SPVs are trying to hide who they are, right? By registering them in secrecy jurisdictions, places where, tax rates aren't as high and company ownership isn't as open as the country. It tells you something about the intention. But we left that out of the story because, we couldn't get to the very end of that trade. If we did, perhaps we'd have been having a different discussion.
But explain, what is the purpose of bringing in this SPV? So you want to buy an Embraer, the manufacturer of the Embraer, you are the airline that's going to benefit. What's the purpose of bringing in an intermediary?
So an intermediary or a special purpose vehicle, especially when you're seeking financing, is used in many, many transactions so that the bank feels safe. The bank that's financing you feels safe that you're going to be able to pay. They have some sort of oversight over the SPV, and you're able then to commit through buying that. Sometimes SPVs are used as these kinds of things. But why I was talking about the beneficial ownership of these SPVs is because then it tells you that there might be another third party that we're not even seeing who is at the table, but we don't understand the intention of. And even the push to buy the Embraers themselves, the question is why, right? And that justification over the years, has been made variously about fuel economy of those planes, but, fuel hedging is one of our biggest issues, so that didn't help very much, right? So the question of the SPVs, even to the Senate committee, was something that really, confused them. It was a bit bewildering. Why would you do it in this way? Why would you go and, establish these kinds of relationships with a company that is not, even though it was a private company at the time, but publicly owned as well, the Kenyans have a huge stake in Kenya Airways. So why make all of these decisions? And hopefully over time, this kind of, the answers that we've been seeking will come out. There are people out there, by the way, Eric, who know exactly what the answers to those questions are,
But
who
John,
we're hoping will come out.
John, doesn't this kind of point to some kind of malpractice? If we're just going to be honest and open about it and say that, beyond the mismanagement and making of decisions that just doesn't seem to make any kind of sense, then couldn't this point to malpractice, so that individuals somewhere, as we see in very many cases, were using this decision to their own benefit at some point? Because just coming off the premise of some of the things that you have said, if we know that an airline makes most of its profits through cargo, and then you go in and then buy smaller vehicles in this sense that then are not able to meet the cargo needs or the cargo demand, it's clear and obvious that then you lose out on something that you would essentially make money from. And so the decision was still taken.
Yeah.
And then the question still remains, why? Wouldn't it be that there was some kind of malpractice here?
Well, the reason why we didn't go directly at that term malpractice is because malpractice denotes very specific things, right? And you'd have to be able to establish intent, you'd have to be able to, establish motives, etc. Why we settled on the term mismanagement is because of the consequences of those actions, right? Because we couldn't find the person at the other end of the smoking gun, right? It would be very, very difficult to say so. But yes, anecdotally, that's what it would point to, that there'd be some sort of intent, some motive that would lead to the making of those kinds of decisions. we can't say that in the story until we have the proof of that. But in conversation, perhaps that's where it would lead.
It's quite interesting and disheartening when you look at this, and even you get to a point so many years down the road, even after an investigation by a Senate committee, by investigation by so many others, you're still unable to unearth some of these truths. What does that point to? What does that say to you?
Let me speak generally about what that means in a country like this. If you, for all of your efforts, have investigated and have been led to the very door where the answers would lie on the other side of that door, it often means that the person holding that other side of that door is far more powerful than even the investigative, capacity that you have, right? Let me leave it at that, because then now you'd be able to deduce what I'm saying.
Okay. If you're even going higher up, we started the show this morning talking about how things rot, a fish rots from the head, and say that then higher up is where the problems actually lie. So then to see something that could be, I mean, if we look across the continent from Nigeria to Cameroon to South Africa, we've seen countries basically that their national airlines have fallen into absolute pieces as far back as the 80s. And Kenya seems to have taken that same direction for the same problems that these other airlines have fallen apart. Is it an African problem?
I know it's not, because airlines across the world have also collapsed because of mismanagement. Like I said, the airline business really requires disciplined, focused management, because you're dealing with razor thin margins, and the airline business is very, very sensitive to various shocks. I'll give you an example that Kenya Airways often use as a problem that caused some of the things that we're seeing now, or a couple of problems. So the terrorism attack in 2013, the Ebola pandemic in 2014, affecting West Africa, to which we flew our most lucrative routes, right? So if that was cut off, then that means there's a lot of revenue that's not coming in, right? Right now with COVID-19, there's also problems in terms of international travel. So all of those shocks combine to really harm an airline. I really don't like saying that it's an African problem, because what that denotes is something very self-deprecating to us, that it is only us who have those kinds of problems, and it's because of our skin and our genes. But there definitely is a trend in terms of the decisions that African leaders have taken to be able to collapse companies such as these. So in that way, you can say that it might be a global problem, but it is localized in Africa. And the problem isn't how we manage airlines, it's how we lead, right? And that's the problem. The problem is that our leadership has consistently failed or not lived up to the aspiration of the citizenry, and have done things to make it seem as if we all have a problem. But the truth of the matter is the problem is very, very acute, and we know where it lies.
This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Speaking to us this morning is John-Allan Namu, the CEO and co-founder of Africa Uncensored. Africa Uncensored is an investigative journalism hub that has come up with a story that's online. It's called Kenya Airways, Fall of the Pride. It's a 4-part series. John-Allan Namu is taking us through this story and what they found out. Keep it right here.
We were a very profitable airline up to a point in time. The airline made decisions which were very critical in terms of expansion.
KQ made many strategic mistakes. In there, we have a lot of people who are incompetent.
KQ depended on just public relations.
And you look at the structuring, the kind of covert nature of some of the contracts.
So moving to be nationalized is not going to help.
Because you can't keep on throwing money, billions. We've been throwing it over the last 4 or 5 years.
I know there are many things that happened in the past that could have maybe been done differently.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Spice up your life. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM. The weather with Spice FM.
All right, it's still mostly cloudy in Nairobi, overcast for most parts of the morning, going to highs of 27 and lows of 14 today. Nyeri is experiencing light rain showers at 16, likely to last for most of the day, highs of 24 and lows of 14. Nakuru is sunny at 13 degrees, going to highs of 24 and lows of 12. It's mostly sunny in Eldoret this morning, and it'll last that way throughout the day, going to highs of 22 and lows of 11. It's 19 degrees and sunny in Kisumu. It'll change later, though, with showers. Highs of 28 and lows of 18. It's mostly sunny in Kakamega at 16 degrees, going to highs of 26 and lows of 14 today with a chance of rain later on. It's going to be mostly cloudy in Mombasa throughout today. It's currently 16 degrees, going to highs of 29 and lows of 24. Partly cloudy conditions in Malindi at 26, going to highs of 29 and lows of 25. It's mostly cloudy in Kampala at 18, going to highs of 25 and a chance of rain in the afternoon. Mostly sunny conditions in Dar es Salaam today, highs of 31 and lows of 22. Joburg is cloudy at 12, going to highs of 19 and a chance of thunderstorms later. Let's round things out in Lagos for now. It's partly cloudy, a break from the rain, highs of 29 and lows of 23.
Traffic.
Okay, guys, looking for an update on Mombasa on Thika Road rather.
Kenya Airways, the fall of the pride. This is a 4-part series produced by Africa Uncensored team, led by John-Allan Namu, and the team actually did a very good job, City. You watched the 4-part series. Tries to go back into understanding what exactly happened to Kenya Airways, which was at some point really the pride. It's still a pride for many people, because you still have that feeling of ownership. And you feel that Kenya Airways belongs to us, it's ours.
That pride is severely dented.
Really?
It's damaged.
By?
You know, if you use that airline as often as some people did, I was one such person, and you knew that other people from around the world not only relied on that airline, but took their business, that airline, instead of their own airlines, it indicated to you just how superior that airline was. Now, that's where the pride was. It was a quality airline. Whether it is the meals, it was the service, everything about that airline was perfectly world class. Now, when you see that descending to the depths it has descended to, and you know very well that that is as a result of some efforts people have made to bring it to its belly, that pride is then dented because it was done by our own people.
John, as you hear CT say that, would that be the reasons why you do a story like this or an expose of this nature? Are those some of the reasons why? Because something that held such pride and was globally renowned and then falling to its belly, would that be one of the reasons why you would want to find out exactly what happened?
For sure. I mean, at Africa Uncensored, what we do is we work in the public interest. So any story that is in the public's interest to understand, then we'll go into. But for Kenya Airways, for sure, there was some attachment. There is an attachment. For me personally, like I said, it's an important airline to my life. The first time I ever flew on an airline, it was a Kenya Airways plane, right? And if you think about it, how many of the things that we call truly Kenyan that are global can we stand up and say, so we can count our athletes, and Kenya Airways is one there, and there's our tourism, etc.
Yeah.
But Kenya Airways was an ambassador to the world from Kenya. To see it fail in the manner that it has is not only disappointing, but a very important thing for Kenyans to understand, and that's the approach that we took. That it's really something that must be uncovered for Kenyans to be able to understand.
Do you think we'll get the answers? And I ask this question with caution, because there's so many other things that are going on in the country at the same time for which answers are being looked for, but then it has been shrouded in ambiguity. Everybody's saying, yes, well, something may have gone wrong, but fingers are not being pointed in the right direction. So, I mean, there are many things that are going on right now of this nature. Do you think that the answers to this will come out?
I have to be philosophical about that, to be honest. And this is just coming from my own experience, having covered other things. Many times you get to the point that we've reached, right, where answers are important for people to either get closure, to be able to understand and make decisions going forward. But the mist, the fog that of our current state has been there in the past, and I am not very hopeful that we will get the kind of focused answers that we require, especially at a time when it's being renationalized. I really hope that we do. But the goal of Africa Uncensored is over and above trying to get these answers, is to add to the institutional memory of the public, so that when those answers do come, then we can turn around and say, then, well, these were the questions that led to this. So eventually, I hope that they come. I hope that they come soon. But I really have no control over that, and past experience has taught me to be more philosophical about these things.
Looking at what you unearthed when your team was speaking to the various current managers of Kenya Airways, is it important to look at the past so that they are able to then move forward? Or are they saying that let the bygones be bygones, we are where we are and we have an airline to run, so let's just focus on the future?
Well, that's basically Mr. Kabuka's point of view, that we are where we are, let's look forward, let's try and sort out what we have currently facing us. But the past is prelude, right? If we do not understand what happened in the past, what stops it from happening again? And I'm saying this even knowing Mr. Kabuka's record with, propping up and turning Jambo Jet into a successful subsidiary of Kenya Airways, right? But nonetheless, he is one person, right? It took very many things for Kenya Airways to get to the point that it's reached. And he must have a very good grasp, and not just him, but all of us must have a very good grasp of the problems that Kenya Airways has faced. And I think even when the interview was being done by our producer, he continuously made this point that, look, we're looking at what problems led us to the point that we are at, so that there's that understanding. So it's very important for us to understand our history. Speaking more generally, if we understood our history perhaps with more nuance as Kenyans, then many of the mistakes that we're making today, even if we made them, we'd make them knowing that we know the mistakes that have happened in the past and we're making these deliberately. At least then that absolves you of some sort of ignorance. But we must understand what's happened in the past, specific to this company.
When you think of Kenya Airways, I like to delve into history. There was a period when, during the time of President Moi, something that you would think would never happen actually happened. You would think that if you have an organization or an institution that has monopolistic powers and is in charge of a service that is actually needed, that it is not possible for it to collapse. Unfortunately, we saw it actually happening. Kenya Post and Telecommunication, a monopoly, no competition. You're providing a service that everyone needs. Kenya National Assurance, again, something similar. Now, these are institutions that collapsed before our very eyes. It's not something that you have to delve into deep history. It happened, and it's a reality. But then, what was interesting about Kenya Post and Telecommunications, Telcom was not part of Posta. There was what they call ex-telecoms. It was a separate entity and actually a profit-making. Then they merged them. These processes of mergers, somehow, when the government is involved, never do well for those who want to see a profit. That's why people move away from nationalizing institutions and making them open or making them business enterprises whose focus is, yes, on providing service, but also trying to make profit. It takes me back to the role of government. The government is not a business entity in that sense of the word. The government's primary role is to provide services. Now, the government is telling us they want to go into business. How's that going to work out?
Well, CT, you've raised very, very pertinent, examples, right? With Kenya Post and Telecommunications and the national insurance. I can't help but agree with you that it's really not government's place to be doing business. It should be enabling the business environment. But then again, the one example that is constantly bandied about is Safaricom, right? So one of Kenya's most profitable companies, and when run fairly well, it was able to post huge profits to the extent that Safaricom is a behemoth that it is today. But Safaricom is kind of a unicorn, where we really have to think very carefully and strategically about what this decision will be. Now, I can't on one hand say that, renationalization is a bad decision because, perhaps I don't have all of the cards that the president and the cabinet are holding in terms of what their strategy will be. Perhaps there's an opportunity that other strategic assets that the government will take it seriously, and perhaps we might have to lean on the side of optimism when it comes to this, but the past shows us that many times this is a problem. This is an issue, right? And in as much as we're not, that was made in the documentary was that in as much as we're nostalgic, the decision that we make, especially as Kenyans who are very price sensitive, will often come down to price versus quality. Am I going to fly on Kenya Airways because it is Kenya Airways, or am I going to fly on it because it offers a cheaper ticket, it offers better quality service, and it flies me to the routes that I need to go to? These are the kinds of decisions that are being weighed right now. And the problem is we also don't have a lot of runway to make these decisions because Kenya Airways is in dire debt distress, right? It's facing very severe problems. And the support that the government has given it to this point in time has not been adequate for it to be able to manage, the problems that it has. Yeah. Even though it's making money, the mountain of the problems on its back are really something that they're struggling with. I really, really sympathize with the staff who are flying on those routes at Kenya Airways because they work as hard as they can. That's really, if you're looking for an example of the people who we must think about, that we should think about when we're making this decision. Those guys who earn their livings directly from Kenya Airways. Then now speaking more widely, if Kenya Airways were to collapse, right, what would the impact be to the wider economy? Yeah. I know there are some people, including people in our documentary, who have said that it should be allowed to fail and then we start again. But I think the reason why so many businesses, and this is just me speaking generally, right? The reason why so many businesses globally have been able to locate themselves here is a number of things. Good business climate, good weather, good connectivity, right? And Kenya Airways is a part of that, troika, if you call it that. If it collapses, then what lies on the other side of that collapse? None of us know, right? So at this point in time, we're really making decisions or really, postulating on the basis of things that have happened in the past. So, CT, that's how I'd answer that question. That, look, the past doesn't give us a lot of confidence that things going forward will be better. But nonetheless, we're at a very critical junction where if we do not make a decision, then the alternative could be worse.
As you speak now, there's a bill before Parliament that is, seeking to move the airline towards that place of renationalization. And I'm sure your team, as they were working on this story, they must have also spoken to people who had an opinion on the current goings on. What is it that comes out? Is there widespread support for the renationalization? Is there a greater opposition to it? What is the vibe?
Well, the vibe is that there's quite a bit of opposition. If you look at what LSK has done to go and stop the renationalization of Kenya Airways, that tells you that even at that level, that there's quite a bit of opposition to what's happening. I think we're in a position, like I said, where there are decisions that are being made where we don't have a clear understanding as to why, beyond the fact that Kenya Airways is loss-making. Why this decision? Why not a bailout? Why not other options that we have to try and prop up the airline and try and keep it profitable? Why not, insisting, like, for instance, one of the issues that were raised by some fairly senior managers that I spoke to were when Kenya started inviting other airlines to land in Kenya, there was no reciprocity, right? Yeah. So you're inviting your competition here, but you're not getting the same sort of fair shake on the other end when you land, right? And that makes it expensive for you to operate even in the face of your competitors. Why are those kinds of decisions being rethought? Another thing was that the partnership with KLM, which is coming to an end, which really held us in a position where we could only fly to specific places in Europe and other destinations that possibly weren't even profitable for us. Are we now going to reconsider and try and get to better routes? Why is nationalization the only thing that we are, considering? Is it the best option? And given that now Kenya Airways is going to become a fully public asset, or at the very least, the government is going to play a bigger role, shouldn't there be a more nuanced discussion about where Kenya Airways is going? I understand the time limitations that we face as Kenya Airways, but it's really, really important that we make the next decision very, very well. Look to the south. South African Airways has all but collapsed, right? Are we going to go down the same route?
Let me just throw in the cat among the pigeons here then, just off the back of what you've just said. The timing of the release of this piece by Africa Uncensored, the sort of slant that this story has taken, the questions then would emerge. Why now? Who is this that is, urging you, nudging you, Africa Uncensored, to produce this story? To what end are you producing this story? Are you working on behalf of, either knowingly or unknowingly, people who are against a move to renationalize Kenya Airways and bring it to profitability?
No, we're not. I can say that with absolute certainty that we're not working on, we're not working for anybody, or we are not being nudged by anybody to make any decisions about releasing this documentary at this point in time. The point here is we started working on this documentary more than 6 months ago, right? The time that it came to fruition was now. Fortunately for us, that it's come at a time when there is a debate about renationalization. But there was no intent to now, when Kenya Air is about to make this move, then we release this documentary. I think what has happened, if I'll be perfectly honest, is that there are people out there with their own specific interests who are now riding on the content that the story has unveiled to try and pursue their own agendas. But we can't be responsible for what other people are doing, with a public interest story. The painstaking measures that we took to go through documentation, to try and seek comment. In fact, one of the things that delayed the release of this story should have been out at least a month earlier, right? What delayed that was trying to seek comment from Kenya Airways staff, right, as well as other people, like, for instance, people who are part of the Senate committee, and try and tie up our facts and fact check everything to make sure that we were right on the money. So I understand that some critics would be very upset by the timing of the documentary, but on our part, we did not purpose to try and make it, come out at a point when Kenya is struggling with the courts, it's struggling with the unions, it's struggling with all of these things. Yeah. But the point is, these are pertinent questions that need to be asked anyway.
And in terms of information that needs to be given to people I mean, looking at something that, many would see as an asset for the country, and they're not really understanding what is happening. I mean, do you find yourselves in a place to give information? Because for many a Kenyan, it would be, here you had something that was the pride in the sky and then has taken a nosedive and then would die and join the graveyard of other failed things, in the country. So now really giving information as to what happens, how important of a role do you think that as giving information plays in all of this? Whichever decision is made.
Well, information is really important. Information, as they say, is power, right? So the documentary seeks to do that, to really give people an account of the decisions that are being made, the loss-making ventures that Kenya Airways went on, and the decisions that face it in the future. So information is very powerful. If I understand your question, is are we willing to go out and give this information, say, to a committee that investigates this question?
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, beyond some of the confidential sources that came forward for the production of this documentary, and some of the, like the Deloitte report, etc., majority of this information already is in the public domain. It is in Kenya Airways' own company annual report, right? So what we did is that we went through the report and published the information in a manner which people could understand.
Right.
But this information had been widely known before. Perhaps it had never really been in one place. And I think that's the role of the documentary, to curate the information so that people are able to digest it.
Sorry, go ahead, Sidi.
No, I was going to ask, do you think, for instance, that if the government took a little more time to actually piece together its argument for nationalization, and if it was convincing, that perhaps the backlash would be lessened?
I think so. I think if the government really took time to both look through the decision, because I think part of the big motivation for this was also actually coming from the National Assembly, right? But if the government took its time to really painstakingly go through this and go through it with the public, right, explain the decisions that they are making, then there would be less backlash. Not all of the backlash would evaporate, because there are still people who are very, very critical of the move. But at the very least, it would give people some sense of peace with where the direction in which we are moving and why we are doing so. But this is the story, if I'm to speak again widely about BBI, right? So we are given a very broad explanation about what it is about, but there's nothing more. We're just being told a report is coming, but at the same time we're being told a referendum is coming. Both things that are very important to the future of this country. It's kind of the same thing with renationalization, where we're told we're renationalizing, right? And here's the bill, and this is what's going to happen in the bill, but the logic and the future of Kenya Airways is not really being explained to the public, who are going to be carrying this national asset, in years to come. That's where I think the government can play a key role. The Ministry of Transport specifically can play a key role in helping people understand. And then if people disagree, then you must also rule with the consent of the people, right? If the people disagree, then there must be other options to make, right? It's easy for me to say this not sitting in the boardroom of Kenya Airways, but having seen the kind of things that we've seen, then it's also the right of Kenyans to ask these questions.
John-Allan, we want to thank you very much for joining us this morning and speaking to us about this documentary that you've produced as Africa Uncensored, Kenya Airways, Fall of the Pride. Before we let you go, there's some development on a story that you've also been following for many years, and this is on the arrest of Felician Kabuka. Now the decision has been made that the trial is going to happen in Arusha. What do you make of that?
That's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very interesting that it's so close to where the crimes in Rwanda took place, and what measures will be taken, interestingly, to secure Felician and Kabuka, as this trial takes place. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are very, very interested in ensuring that Kabuka meets an end, whether through courts or otherwise.
Right.
What measures are being taken to do so. It's a coming, it's full circle really. That the man who, at least from what the evidence says, was one of the key motivators of one of the worst stains on Africa's conscience, is now sitting in trial however many years later. It really tells you that the arc, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice, as Martin Luther King used to say.
Right.
Indeed. Asante sana, John, for speaking to us, and say hello to your team at Africa Uncensored. Good job.
Thank
well
you.
done.
Asante. Thanks a lot for talking with me about it.
Thank you so much,
Have
John.
a good day.
All right, you too.